Good morning. In 1993 April, as part of our observance of the centennial of Swami Vivekananda's appearance at the Parliament of Religions in Chicago, Swami Bhaskarananda visited us in St. Louis from his center in Seattle, the Vedanta Society, Western Washington. And one evening, he gave an extemporaneous, almost an impromptu talk on spiritual life. He had about 10 minutes to put it together. He'll explain the circumstances when he starts his talk. But it was an inspired talk. He's an author. He's written quite a few books during the latter part of his tenure in Seattle, and very highly respected as a capable and inspiring monk of our order. He'll speak on spiritual life, and it's entitled A Spiritual Talk.
Bhadram karnevi srinuyama devaham Bhadram pashe makshabhirjajatraham Sthirairangai estustuvagum sastanuvihi Vashimati vahitin yadayuhu Shanti Shanti Shanti. May we hear with our ears what is auspicious. May we see with our eyes what is auspicious. Tranquil in body and mind, may we spend our lifetime for God realization and for doing good to humanity. Peace, peace, peace be unto all. Friends, this evening, Swami Bhaskarananda ji, the head of the Vedanta Society of Western Washington, Seattle, will give a talk on spiritual life. After Swami's talk, you are welcome to ask him some questions. Swami last Sunday spoke twice, as you remember. He is leaving tomorrow for Seattle, so I thought it would be nice, instead of my Upanishad class, Swami gives a talk on spiritual life. It is good to hear from various standpoints, from various Swamis about spiritual life. That is the way we can enrich ourselves. Spiritual life, human life generally has three planes: physical plane, mental or intellectual plane, and the spiritual plane. Most people live in the physical plane, eating, sleeping, enjoyment. Some people, not a vast majority, live in the intellectual plane, mental plane. Those who are devoted to art, science, commerce, literature, religious life. I'm talking about external religious life. And few people sincerely devote themselves to spiritual life. Spiritual life is very vital to all of us, because all peace and joy come through the spirit, not through the body, not through the materialistic objects. So spiritual life, as Swami Vivekananda once said, where philosophy ends, religion begins. It is not good to stay in the intellectual plane also, because sometimes it becomes boring, tiring. So Swami will talk about spiritual life. Only one thing I shall tell you about Latu Maharaja, he was working on his life. In connection with his spiritual life, he made a comment to a Swami or some preachers on preaching. You see, preaching, if I try to preach and teach, he said, people will not listen to it. Because the audience will think that it is the urge of the preacher to preach. It is not my urge, it is his urge. But if you lead life, good spiritual life, then the people will be impressed, will be interested to know about the Spirit, about God. Seeing your life, if I see you are very joyful, peaceful, and all loving, then people will think, my goodness, I like that. Then people will come, and if we speak, people will listen. So those who come to Vedanta, seeing your lives, your frames, wherever you go, will be interested to know more about spiritual life. Swami Brahmananda used to say that sometimes people may fail to, in the materialistic plane, could not achieve anything, but it never happened. A person led spiritual life and did not get anything. A devotee came to Belur Math and said to Swami Brahmananda, Maharaj, I am coming last 20 years here, but I am not getting anything. Maharaj kept quiet. He asked Swami Shivananda, Mahapurush, did you hear? This devotee came to me and said that he is coming here for last 20 years, but he did not get anything. Mahapurush Maharaj said, Maharaj, don't listen to them. They get, they do not know. Then Maharaj put the same question to other devotees and said, Sir, did you hear? This man says that he was coming last 20 years but did not get anything. That devotee was very embarrassed. At last Maharaj said, you get something you do not know. If you would not get anything, you would not come here second time. So those who come here, they get something. Otherwise, why will they come? Anyhow, Swami Bhaskarananda will tell us some of the practical things about spiritual life. Moreover, he had great opportunity to live in Belur Math for 14 years. I lived only 2 years. And he was closely connected with many senior Swamis. As I always said to you, everything is not in the book. Something you will have to learn from these Swamis. So when these Swamis come, it is a great spiritual feast, not only for me, but for the devotees also. So I request Swami Bhaskarananda ji to speak to you on spiritual life. Thank you.
Good evening, friends. Until 10 minutes ago, I had the impression that this evening I would not be required to give a talk, but it would be a question and answer session. Then one of my junior brothers went and told me that that's not what was going to be. I'd be required to give a talk on a spiritual subject. English language is one of the richest languages in the world, but even though it is one of the richest languages of the world, it has certain deficiencies. Particularly, when we try to translate some Sanskrit expressions that we have in our religious tradition, into English, then we don't find the adequate counterparts always. The word spirituality is often used to be the counterpart of the Sanskrit word which is adhyatmika. But unfortunately, the English word spirituality does not really express the meaning of the Sanskrit word adhyatmika. The word adhyatmika means something which pertains to the body and mind, the physical body and the mind. Anything which pertains to the physical body and the mind, that is adhyatmika. But if I translate this word into English as spiritual or spirituality, then one may develop this notion that perhaps one, when one is using the word spiritual, then one is referring to the indwelling spirit or the soul. But the word adhyatmika does not really mean that. Therefore, at the very outset, I want to make this idea very clear that when I shall use the word spiritual, thereby I will mean something which pertains to the mind and the body and not the indwelling spirit. We use expressions like spiritual progress. Well, according to our understanding, the indwelling spirit or the soul never progresses or regresses. It is changeless. Which is changeless, how can it progress or regress? Obviously, spiritual progress does not mean the progress of the Atman or this indwelling soul, but it means the progress of the mind. Progress in a very special manner. That means the mind gets transformed in a manner which can help the spiritual aspirant to know his or her indwelling self or the soul. As though the mind is a pair of glasses through which the spiritual aspirant has to see the soul. If the glasses are covered with many layers of dust, then one won't see the soul. The mind is a pair of glasses. The dust has to be cleaned. And when the dust has been cleaned, then one can see the soul within. Not literally. Figuratively speaking. Therefore, when we speak of spiritual progress, then thereby we mean progress pertaining to our body and mind. Because for an ordinary person, the mind and body are associated very closely with each other. When something happens to such a person's body, something in the form of suffering, physical suffering, then that person's mind becomes affected by that. When a person has physical suffering, then his mind also starts suffering. Or when that person's mind is upset, the body starts suffering. The person becomes ill. That's why I think in our religious tradition, when they speak of adhyatmika progress, thereby they mean the progress of the body and the mind. But when a spiritual aspirant has made a lot of progress, that means has learned how to transform his or her mind into what I will call a highly purified mind, or a mind which has been cleansed properly, then the clinging of the mind to the body and vice versa, that becomes much less pronounced. As though the mind and body, they become separate from each other. Let me refer to a great saint of our order, Swami Shivananda, who was the president of our order, who was a disciple of Sri Ramakrishna. In the later part of his life, he used to suffer from attacks of asthma. And anyone who has seen a patient suffering from asthma can easily realize how uncomfortable a person can be who has that problem. A person who suffers from asthma cannot breathe in enough air, and there is some sort of partial air hunger is created, and that person suffers immensely. And Swami Shivananda would have such attacks. One day, a devotee came to see the Swami. And just then, the Swami was suffering very much from asthma. It was hard for him to breathe. And the devotee, with great sympathy for the Swami, asked, Swamiji, how are you? How are you? Then the Swami said, well, my body is not well, but mentally I am all right. For him, the body and mind had become separate. The body was suffering, but not his mind. I've heard from one Swami who was a disciple of Swami Shivananda. We call him Shambhu Maharaj. He told me that one day he had gone to see Swami Shivananda when he had been suffering very badly from asthma. And when he went to see the Swami and entered his room, then he found the Swami in great physical agony. He was tossing and turning in bed, trying to have a breath of air, as it were. And Shambhu Maharaj started watching him, and he was a disciple of Swami Shivananda. Then Shambhu Maharaj started thinking, well, Swami Shivananda, he has had the experience of samadhi. He is one of those great disciples of Sri Ramakrishna. And yet he has been suffering so much physically and also reacting to such physical suffering just as any other ordinary person would do. Such a thought came to his mind. And as soon as that thought came to his mind, Swami Shivananda sat up as though he was all right, his face beaming, and said, how are you? And like that. He started talking to Shambhu Maharaj. Of course, Swami Shivananda had complete control over his mind. And a person who has got mastery over his mind has mastery over the body also. If he wants to have total control over his body, then by exercising his extremely powerful mind, he can make that happen. That's what happened to Swami Shivananda. Power of mind over body. We can see that happen. In case of such people who have got total mastery over their minds, but they don't necessarily use their mental power to cure their physical illnesses. Because having come to know that they are not a psychophysical complex, but they are that indwelling, eternal Atman, or having come to know that identity with divinity, they can't think anymore that they are embodied beings. They can't identify with their body anymore, nor can they identify with their mind. Because mind and body both, to them, have been proved to be extraneous to their true being. Let me refer to one incident of Sri Ramakrishna's life. Sri Ramakrishna had developed the cancer of his throat by then, and he was sitting on his bed or cot or couch, whatever you may call it, and there entered one of his householder devotees, who is no other than Mr. Nag, a wonderful devotee, humility personified. He was humility personified. And many of you have read his life story. That's why I am not going to elaborate on that. But he was humility personified. Mr. Nag entered there, and Mr. Nag, by profession, was a naturopathic doctor. We call such doctors in India homeopathic doctors. He was a naturopathic doctor. And as soon as he entered Sri Ramakrishna's room, and there were other disciples and devotees of Sri Ramakrishna present in that room, Sri Ramakrishna, who usually used to be humorous and cheerful and full of joy, in spite of his physical ailment, said to Mr. Nag, "Hello, doctor. Can you cure my illness?" Pointing to his throat, Sri Ramakrishna said to his disciple, Mr. Nag, said, "Hello, doctor. Can you cure my illness?" And the personification of humility, Mr. Nag, became extremely embarrassed. He didn't know what to say or what to do. But then suddenly a change came to his countenance, as though his face started beaming, and he stretched his arm and started proceeding towards Sri Ramakrishna as though to touch him. And he said, "Yes, by the grace of my Guru, I can cure your illness." He was about to touch Sri Ramakrishna's throat. And Sri Ramakrishna said, "Yes, yes, I know you can, but stop there. Stop there." It is a dramatic scene, one of the many dramatic scenes which we come across when we go through the life of, the wonderful life of Sri Ramakrishna. Why did Mr. Nag stretch his arm, and why did he want to touch Sri Ramakrishna? Because he was also a master of his own mind, and by his mental power, he was capable of absorbing the illness of Sri Ramakrishna and suffer in Sri Ramakrishna's behalf. He could have done it. Sri Ramakrishna did not allow it. because he had, as though he had planned his entire life long before he came down to earth. He wanted that his illness should continue. So many people came, devotees. They said to Sri Ramakrishna, why don't you turn your mind on the sore that you have on your throat? Please do it for our sake. Please turn your mind and focus that mind on your sore, and it will be healed. Sri Ramakrishna used to be childlike. When people would come, he would ask them, oh, well, you see, I have this problem, I can't swallow anything. And that was, of course, his disguise, really. And no matter what persuasion would be there on the part of others, Sri Ramakrishna would never agree to focus his mind on that sore which he had in his throat and cure that illness. He could have done it. He had immense power of his mind to cure that illness which he had. But he wouldn't do it, because to him his body had become something which is worthless compared to the soul within. Ever effulgent, ever radiant, that eternity, that infinite bliss which is the soul. Sri Ramakrishna had tasted of that. Compared to that, his body was nothing. That's why he wouldn't use his mind to cure his body, that illness of his body. Therefore, spiritual progress really and truly means mental progress more than physical progress. If a person can make mental progress, if a person can transform one's mind into that kind of mind which will enable him or her to see the soul, to experience the soul, then that person has succeeded in having real spiritual progress. Spiritual progress means mental progress. When devotees come to our Swamis for spiritual help, they want to learn how they can gain control and mastery over their mind, how they can purify their mind, and how they can see God. Then what does a Swami do in regard to such a devotee? The Swami usually gives some instruction suitable for one's spiritual growth. That means mental growth. Usually, the Swami will ask such a devotee to chant the holy name of God. And the Swami will say, you chant the holy name of God. That will take care of everything. When the devotee hears that, the devotee thinks, what is this? Chanting the holy name of God and that alone will do everything? It sounds so simple. And I have come driving all these miles to this Swami. This Swami is no good. Let me go to the other one who charges $500 for the first instruction, and this Swami doesn't charge any money. That's why his instruction is worthless. But I tell you that according to our ancient religious tradition, a spiritual teacher must never charge any fee for any spiritual instruction given. If he takes any fee for any spiritual help that he gives, then he violates that time-honored, sacred tradition of Hinduism. Therefore, no Swami or no holy man must ever charge, if that person be from India, must ever charge money. If he does so, then he does the worst insult to our sacred tradition of monasticism. Well, that's why the Ramakrishna Swamis don't charge anything. They do that in a spirit of service to the children of God. Well, the Swami says, go and chant the holy name of God. And then he tells the devotee what holy name of God the devotee should chant. Well, the devotee could have chosen one of the many holy names of God which are available in any dictionary, perhaps, and let's go on chanting without the Swami's help. But if the devotee does that, then the devotee will have some benefit. But if the devotee takes the Swami's help, then the devotee will have much more benefit. And there is a reason for it. Because in our religious tradition, the tradition of our monastic order, only such holy names of God are given to the devotees which have helped some souls to have God vision, which have helped some people to become spiritually illumined. And such holy names are called Siddha Mantras in Sanskrit. That means the holy words, a holy word is a mantra, say a holy word which has helped a person to succeed in his spiritual practice. And success in spiritual practice means realizing God or realizing divinity in oneself. Why are these words so special? Well, let me explain. Let me suppose a person has, one gentleman has gone to his doctor for a checkup, and the doctor, after a thorough examination, notices some tumor growing inside the stomach of that patient, and that is malignant. And the doctor tells the patient that, well, I'm sorry to say that you have a malignant growth in your stomach and we have to do something about it. But I am not an oncologist. I am a GP. I am not an oncologist, so you should better go to an oncologist and take necessary steps. The person becomes extremely upset because he has come to know that he has developed cancer, and he comes home with a sad face, and he gives that bad news to his wife. Then his wife, in order to comfort him, says, John, don't worry, cancer gets cured. I'm sure you will get cured. It is just the preliminary stage. You will get cured. Don't worry, you will get cured, John. And that gentleman has a little son. The son also has come to know about it, and the son comes to him and said, Daddy, don't worry, you will get cured. Then John goes to the best oncologist of the world. He happened to be visiting that city at the time. And he's lucky, John is lucky, so he gets an appointment with that oncologist, that cancer specialist. And that cancer specialist examines him and with a smile on his face says to John, you are indeed lucky. You have that kind of cancer which can be cured positively. Don't worry, you will be cured of your cancer. Now, three persons have said more or less the same words, His wife, John's wife said, "Don't worry, you will get cured." John's little son said, "Daddy, don't worry, you will get cured." And that cancer specialist, the oncologist, also has said the same thing. "Don't worry, you will get cured." Now, whose words will have the maximum impact on John's mind? It is obvious. The cancer specialist's words will have the maximum impact. He'll be convinced by his words. Why? What's so special about the words of that oncologist? Because behind his words, his entire life's experience is there. That's why. His words may be exactly like the words which had been spoken by John's wife or John's little son, but the difference is there. The difference is that these words have been spoken by a person who knows about cancer. He knows about how to cure cancer. And through his many years of practice, he has become the topmost oncologist in the world. His entire life's experience is behind his words. That's why his words will have that telling effect on John's mind. So also, when a Swami of our order gives some holy name of God to a devotee and says, "Chant this holy name." Let me suppose that word is Rama. Chant Rama, and that will take care of everything. Then the devotee should understand that this word has helped some others to realize God, and only such a holy word has been given. It is very powerful. And besides that, the Swami who is giving that mantra, so to say, his entire life's spiritual effort is also behind that word. Or in other words, his power is also associated with that word. That's why this word is special. One who is intelligent will take this suggestion seriously and should do what the Swami has asked that person to do. Now, when a person, and chanting the holy name of God is called japa in Sanskrit. Japa. And japa consists of repeatedly chanting that word. The word is Rama. I have chosen that word. And the devotee has been given that word. So the devotee has to go on chanting Rama, 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 Rama as many times as possible. But when the devotee starts chanting the mantra Rama, Rama, not aloud but silently, we can talk mentally. In fact, when we think, we are actually talking mentally. And when we talk, then we are thinking aloud. So, the best type of chanting is done when the holy word is not chanted aloud, but it is chanted silently, mentally. Others will not know that this person is chanting the holy word of God. It is good. If others come to know that this person is chanting Rama, then someone else who also has learned meditation from some other source, maybe paying $500, will say, "Oh, you are chanting Rama." No, that won't work. You chant Hari, that will work. I paid $500 for that, and that will work. You paid nothing for Rama. And the poor devotee will be confused. And then someone else will come and will say, "No, when I was traveling in Tibet, then I discovered one great yogi with long beard and a long matted hair, and hair and beard, they look like snow. such an ancient yogi came out and said to me, chant Hari Om. Nothing can be better than Hari Om. You give up your chanting Rama. That's no good. Chant Hari Om. What will that poor devotee do? That poor devotee, the poor devotee will be confused and will not know what to do. Therefore, it is so much better to chant mentally and not let others know what the devotee is chanting. That's why the teachers, spiritual teachers, they are more experienced. They may not have many university degrees, and the devotees may have. But nevertheless, those spiritual teachers, they know certain things which are not taught in the university. Now, when the devotee sincerely goes on chanting Rama, Rama, Rama mentally, at the specified hours of the day, or throughout the day and night, let me suppose, then problems come. Because there is no work in this world which is devoid of problems. And the first problem comes from where? From the devotee's mind itself. The whole problem with an average person who has not gained control over his mind is that the mind tries to control that person. And the mind has a natural tendency to get bored with doing the same thing over and over again. Once I had to go to a certain place by car with some devotee, and the devotee had a little daughter, and she had carried a large sack full of her toys and so many picture books. By the time we had gone 10 miles, then the little girl said to her mother, "Mommy, I am bored." She had been playing. She had been playing with those toys. But it took maybe about, I don't know, maybe 20 minutes to drive 10 miles. And she had become tired, and she had carried a large sack full of toys and picture books and all that. She got bored. The mind gets bored. The mind gets bored with doing the same thing over and over again. A person is doing some desk work, no matter how valuable that is, and the mind gets bored. Then that person changes his work, or his mind forces that person to change his work. Then he goes out and starts playing tennis. And that he calls entertainment. One psychologist said that entertainment is no other than change of work. A person gets bored with doing one kind of work and then starts doing another kind of work, and that he calls entertainment. Anyway, it is a natural tendency of any mind which has not yet come under control, that kind of mind, to become bored with doing the same thing over and over again. Therefore, the devotee who is trying to chant Rama, Rama, Rama repeatedly finds it hard to chant it because the mind revolts against it. And what does the mind do? If the devotee is adamant and says, no, you have to chant, says to his mind, you have to go on chanting Rama, then the mind plays possum, pretends to be dead. So when a devotee has been trying to chant Rama, 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 then after a while the devotee starts dozing. Some kind of sleep comes. This is an obstacle. That sleep can be very refreshing. It is not a great spiritual experience. It is not samadhi, of course. But that comes to anybody who has tried to chant the holy words seriously. This sleep must come. But the devotee has to learn how to overcome this obstacle. Now, what gain will be there by chanting the holy name of God, the same name, such as Rama? The Swami has said, if you chant this word, then you will have your ultimate spiritual progress. Well, I will explain how japa can help a person to have ultimate spiritual progress. You see, if the devotee can persuade his mind to do the same boring thing over and over again, such as chanting Rama, if the devotee succeeds in doing it, then what is proved thereby? Thereby it is proved that the devotee has gained some control over his mind. And then, when a person has steadfastly done that, then the mind comes under control. Then such chanting becomes automatic. The devotee doesn't even have to make any effort at persuading the mind to do that japa. That person may be doing different things. Maybe that person is talking to someone, and as soon as he has stopped talking, his mind will start chanting the holy words such as Rama, 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 like the ticking of a clock. And that's a relatively safer condition, I would say. That's not a great achievement yet, but it shows that the devotee has gained some control over his mind. Japa can do it. Besides that, japa does another thing. Because when the devotee has been chanting the holy name of God, and the concept of God is that in God there is nothing but holiness. So when the devotee is chanting the holy name of God, then that devotee will have some awareness that the devotee has been thinking of the holiness of God. And the mind has another characteristic, and if I borrow Sri Ramakrishna's words, the mind is like a white piece of cloth. If I dip that white piece of cloth into a bucket which has red dye, then this white cloth will become red. If I put it in another bucket containing green dye, it will become green. Or in other words, the mind takes on the characteristic of the thought which the mind is allowed to think. If the mind thinks of unholy thoughts, the mind will become unholy. If the mind is persuaded to think of holy thoughts, then the mind will start becoming holier and holier. Therefore, through japa, two things are happening. First of all, the devotee is getting more and more control over his mind. And secondly, the devotee's mind is becoming holier and holier, purer and purer. And when the devotee has chanted the mantra a few million times, then of course the devotee will know that there has been some progress. Swami Chaitanyananda, while introducing me this evening, related to one incident in the life of Swami Brahmananda, and also Swami Shivananda was also present at the time. A devotee had come and complained that even though he had been coming to the monastery in Belur for 10 years, no improvement, no spiritual improvement he had experienced. And well, if a person really and truly does japa sincerely, and a few billion times, that person must have the result of that person's action. There cannot be any work without any effect. Every work must have its effect. One devotee came to the Holy Mother Sarada Devi and complained that, and he was a disciple of the Holy Mother Sarada Devi, and complained to her, Mother, I have been doing japa for all these years and I have not been experiencing anything. Means anything good. Then the Holy Mother said, what? You have not experienced anything? If you really and truly want to experience, then chant the mantra, the holy name of God, 10,000 times a day, and after you have done it for a while, you come and tell me that you have not had any spiritual experience. When progress is slow or little, that is not noticeable. When progress is considerable, then that becomes noticeable. When I came to this country, nearly 19 years ago, I hardly had 1 or 2 gray hair. And then some Swami said, well, pointing to my hair, said, look, all his hair is jet black. But it is not true. Not all my hair was jet black. 2 or 3 gray hair I had at that time. Then for the first 2 or 3 years, or maybe 4 or 5 years, my gray hair, even though their number was becoming larger slowly and imperceptibly, still many complimented me, Swami, your hair is jet black. But now nobody will say that my hair is jet black. Because I have a large number of gray hair, white hair on my head, and some black hair too. But the number of white hair is considerably so much larger than the number of black hair that I have. Therefore, that is noticeable. So also, when a person has really and truly worked hard enough, then there will surely be considerable spiritual progress. And then that devotee will surely and certainly know that that devotee has had spiritual progress. A devotee may chant the holy name of God half an hour in the morning and half an hour in the evening, and then after 10 years will come to his teacher and say, Sir, nothing has been happening to me. Well, half an hour in the morning and half an hour in the evening, that means within 24 hours of day and night, he has chanted only for 1 hour. What about the rest 23 hours? He did not chant at that time. So the impact of his thoughts at that time, will that not outweigh the impact of his 1 hour of chanting the holy name? Any little child can understand it. Therefore, we have to spiritualize our day-to-day activity. That's what Sri Ramakrishna has said. No matter what we do, we have to give it a spiritual color. We have to associate with that with God or holiness. We must have to do it if we want to gain advantage from our spiritual practice. People who are in the world, they have to earn their bread and butter. They have to work 8 hours a day and drive another 2 hours to go to his place, to their places of work and coming back. Well, 10 hours are gone. Then what that person can do? He says, Swami, such a person or may come to the Swami and say, Swami, I hardly have 2 hours that I can use to chant the holy name. The rest of the time I have to do other things. I'm sorry about it. Do I not have any hope? Then the Swami will say, surely you have hope. You spiritualize your day-to-day activity. Think that the members of your family, such as your wife and your children, they're not yours, but they belong to God. And you also belong to God. You are God's son. You are not a stepson or an adopted son. You are a true son of God. Because God only has true children, no fake children. And you are taking care of God's people. And that person's wife also must think in the same way, in the same manner, and must think that her husband and her children belong to God, and she is the caretaker. And at the same time, she is the daughter of God, true daughter of God. And then she will take care of her family, truly speaking, God's family, in such a manner which will please God. The house where she lives, she has to think that that house belongs to God, including her kitchen and refrigerator and everything, even her jewelry. Of course, one has to intellectually accept this idea first. This spiritualizing the day-to-day activities. And then when that person will try to do that kind of work, then that person will often forget. Because that person has developed the habit of thinking that this house is hers or his, and the family is his or hers. And that old habit persists. Therefore, to counteract that old habit, that they have to develop new habit, the new habit of thinking again and again, that no, this is not my family, this is the Lord's family, this is God's family, this house is not my house, this is God's house, and so on and so forth. And then, when that person has made such attempts, how many times? I would say 100,000 times. Then it will be easier for that person to think. The thought will start coming naturally to that person's mind that yes, this is the Lord's home, this is the Lord's family. This is called spiritual progress. These are proven methods. These are proven methods. Many, many people have been helped by this method through centuries and centuries in India as well as elsewhere. So, let one go on doing all these things. So, eventually japa will purify the mind of the person who does japa, and also will help that person to gain total control over his mind. And then how far is God realization? So it is not far at all. It is very close. God will suddenly appear and will say, hi. He must. Sri Ramakrishna said, if a person walks one step towards God, God comes 10 steps towards that person. He was not a liar. I never will believe that he can be a liar. What he has said is true. Therefore, surely and certainly God will say, hi. But the devotee has to do japa. For how long will it be? Stories, oh, I see. So I have to invent some story, it looks like. Oh, I cannot invent a story now. All right, let me tell you something else. And some of you most probably have been taught by your Swami to meditate also. Meditating means picturing the presence of Lord inside your heart. So, not your anatomical heart which goes on pumping blood throughout your body, but the region of the heart where you have those emotions such as love, hate, and so on. And the devotee is supposed to think that in the region of the heart, there is a temple, and inside the temple, the Lord is there. And the devotee has to see the face of the Lord. Well, when I was instructed by my teacher first to do that kind of meditation, and this is the best type of meditation and the hardest type of meditation. There are simpler meditations. There are many different techniques, but this is the most difficult and the most beneficial. Anyway, then when I tried to see the chosen deity in my heart, then I was faced with a problem. I felt as though I was standing on the balcony of the second floor of a two-story building, and I was trying to bend my head and down and see what is on the first floor. I don't know whether you felt that way or not, because I was always dumber than many other people. I felt that way. And I find it very hard to think how it is so difficult. Then I understood that I have to think, I have to disidentify from this body. I am not this body. I am different from this body. And I am being different from my body. I am looking at my chosen deity, sitting in front of my chosen deity. Well, some of you may say, how can that be done? How can I be separate from my body? Well, it is possible. Refer to your dream experience. When you dream, when you start dreaming, then your body is in the bed, lying in a horizontal position. The body that you use during your waking state. But when you start dreaming, then you acquire a dream body, which you have created with your own mind, and your dream clothes and everything. And you are running around. You are not in a horizontal position. You are sometimes vertical. You are changing your body positions, going here and there. You are not identifying with that body which is lying in bed. With the help of your imagination, you have created a body of yours, isn't it? And that body becomes so real. The same thing has to be done through guided imagination, and that is called meditation. Through guided imagination, consciously, you have to separate yourself from this body and think that you are different from it, and you are looking at the visible presence of God who is in your heart. It can be done through practice. What cannot be done today can be done later on, after one has done a lot of practice. When I went to see the circus, that's for the first time, as a boy, I was amazed to see what all those performers had been doing. One girl came and started walking on a rope, you see, a tightrope walking it is called. And so many impossible feats they were doing. What is impossible, they were doing that. Well, those performers, could they perform those feats? The very first day they attempted to do them? Obviously not. But through practice, what was impossible first, that became possible. So also it's spiritual life. And when a person can meditate in that manner, then that person has already come to know that that person is not that person's body. That person is different from the body. And that's what we have to learn. Well, I've taken 10 minutes. I think I should stop here, and excuse me for not having been able to tell you a story. I will ask Swami Chetanananda to tell the story to you. Thank you. No, there is no story. I'm in a serious mood. I can't tell stories now. All right. So if you have any questions to ask, I'll be glad to answer them. But please ask very simple questions. I am not very skilled in answering difficult questions. Yes, please.
I hope this is simple. You mentioned about purifying the mind or cleansing the mind. In the Vedanta tradition, is there a way of cleansing the body, or purifying the body, like in yoga, or the yogas of Patanjali?
Yes, there is. Cleansing the body can be done many ways. External cleansing of the body can be done with the help of water, but internal cleansing can be done by eating the right kind of food and drinking the right kind of drink. And also, there is that system called Hatha Yoga. By following Hatha Yoga, also a person can make the body better. I will not say purer, better and healthier and more suitable for meditation and spiritual practice. But one should not be obsessed with the idea of making one's body healthy, because then that person will be trapped in the body and will not be able to go further. But some postures which help, it is not harmful to take the help of them. That's all that I know about. Good. No other questions.
Maybe I can ask a question if I can put it properly. Talk about spiritual life and of course the idea is to attain God.
Yes.
And then comes that we are on the mind, the Vedanta teaching us that we are basically on the mind.
Yes.
And our ultimate goal is to achieve divinity.
Yes.
Divinity means Godhood. And God is without form, timeless, and present place. There is no time there, no concept of time, it means total place. And we are part of God, and that's our goal.
No, excuse me for interrupting, but that is considered to be the ultimate goal when the person loses his individuality and becomes completely one with God. You see, that is the ultimate goal. But there are other goals as well. A person's spiritual goal may be to gain perfection, and perfection is another name of God. A person's goal who is devotional by nature and who has a dualistic trend of mind, that person may like to see God as a personal God, and that person may like to have the closest proximity as possible to God and be always in the presence of God and have the opportunity to serve God. So that is also another goal. So there are different concepts of what you may call spiritual goal in our tradition, and that is called moksha, means liberation. There are different types of liberation. So it is not just one goal, but the ultimate goal is to know one's identity with that impersonal divinity called Nirguna Brahman. Yes, now you may proceed with your question.
So that is our ultimate goal.
Yes.
We reach that state where there is no time, there is no causation.
Yes, that's correct.
And we are all part of that.
We are part of that. You cannot say part of that, because then there will be some difficulty, because that infinity does not have any part.
That's the confusion. Then how did we end up here?
You see, yes. You see, it is not part. They say that there is only one divinity, and which appears to be many, like the ocean and its waves. Each wave can think that it is different from other waves, and also it is different from the ocean. But really and truly, the waves are not different from the ocean. Or one wave is not different from the other waves. All of them are the ocean. Isn't it? Is it acceptable? Yes. So as long as we have a form and a name, a form which which is not just the physical form, but the mental form as well. Or in other words, the psychophysical complex is the form. And when we have that form, then we have a name also, because then at that time we have our ego. What you call ahankara. The ahankara is a function of the mind. That factor of individuation, that factor which separates me from everything else which I am not, that is called the ego. And that ego is a thought only. Or in other words, it is mental. So as long as I think of me in terms of my mind and body, then I surely will have my ego. And that ego will make me feel that I am separate from everything else or everyone else which I am not. But a time will come when I will transcend. It is possible for me to transcend not only my body, but my mind also. And when that will happen, I will regain my true identity. I will regain my true identity. It is like a wave which has suddenly subsided. Its form is gone. That bulge of water is gone. It is subsided. Is it lost? No, it is not lost. It has regained its true identity, and that identity is the ocean. So also, at that level, a person discovers his or her divinity, but in a very special way, because at that time individuality is not there. It is difficult to talk about that experience. Those who have had that experience, which is called the state of nirvikalpa samadhi, even though they were asked to describe that, they couldn't do it, because the words and expressions pertain to this world are not adequate to describe that experience. It is something indescribable. So let me tell you one story which I heard from Swami Adisharananda. So in a certain village, the people somehow came to know through rumor that one person had acquired the knowledge of impersonal Brahman, or in other words, he had become a knower of Brahman, knower of God. They became very proud of him. And all the villagers came to his house. They were standing outside, and one of them went and knocked at the door, and that person came out. That knower of Brahman came out and asked, "What do you want?" They said, "Well, we have heard that you are a knower of Brahman, so we want to learn about Brahman." Then that person said to the villagers, "Do you already know what Brahman is?" Then they all said, "No, sir, that's why you have come." Then that person said, "I don't talk to ignorant people," and he shut the door. Then the villagers conferred again. They had a meeting. Then they hit upon a plan. And one of them came and knocked at the door of the knower of the house, you see, where the knower of Brahman lived. And that man came out and said, "What do you want again?" They said, "Sir, we have heard that you have become a knower of Brahman. That's why we want to learn from you about Brahman." And the knower of Brahman said, "Do you already know about Brahman?" And this time they said, "We know about Brahman. We all know about Brahman." They were not going to commit the same mistake again. See? Then he said, "Well, if you already know about Brahman, then what will I teach you?" And he shut his door the second time. Then the villagers had another meeting. And then they came and knocked at the door. And the knower of Brahman opened the door and asked, "What do you want this time?" They said, "Well, sir, you know what we want. We want to learn from you about Brahman." Then he asked, "Then tell me whether you already know about Brahman." Then half of them said, "We know about Brahman." The other half said, "We don't know about Brahman." Then the knower of Brahman said, "Those of you who know about Brahman, teach others who do not know about Brahman," and he shut the door. Well, why did he behave in this manner? Because Brahman cannot be taught the way we can teach other secular subjects, you see, such as math or chemistry or anything else. Well, I think I have done my duty. I have told a story. Now I should get my vacation, if you permit. Thank you very much.
I really enjoyed Swami's talk on spiritual life. In the Bhagavatam, a holy man named Avadhuta had 24 gurus, and he learned from each one of them. We can learn really many things from many people. I remember when I first came here, you see, when I was initiated, my guru died within 8 or 9 months. So I really could not have any contact with him to inquire much about spiritual life. But I learned a lot from the old Swamis. When I came here, I remember one day Swami Satprakashananda ji told me, Chetanananda, এই চারটি খাও আর ধ্যান জপ করো. Eat a small quantity and repeat your mantram and practice meditation. Then he asked me another question. You see, apart from my Ishta mantra, which I got from my guru, we get 4 more extra mantras when we take these final vows. So out of curiosity, he was asking me, do you repeat those 4 mantras? I said, no. You don't repeat them? No. You repeat them 3 times each mantra. So I still, what that old Swami said to me, I practice those mantras every morning. You know, there are many things to learn. As Swami was telling about his problem when he got instruction that see Ishto inside the heart, how will you see? He tried to see from the 2nd story balcony to the 1st floor. It is a very common problem. I tried to explore that problem. You know, when I knew 2 answers. One answer I got from a letter which was written from an old Swami who was a disciple of Brahmananda, to Swami Pavitrananda, who was also a disciple of Swami Brahmananda, how Brahmananda instructed. He said, try to think that your Ishta is seated here, facing toward your heart, and Ishta is seated just like a picture, face to face. Then I found another place that Ishta is seated there and you go outside and watch it. Watch this both ways, as it is convenient for a person. Swami Bhajanananda wrote an article, Inner Shrine, in one of the editorials of the Prabuddha Bharata. He discussed these things. Both ways are possible. One way is you keep your ego inside and try to see God there. And the other way, you keep your ego out and see God inside. Both ways are possible. It is according to convenience. Those who are visualized people, they try to visualize face to face. They want to sit and see. But Sri Ramakrishna said that, this heart is the best place for meditation. So there are many ways one can do that. Anyhow, these are all very subtle spiritual problems sometimes we face. The more you explore and practice, with the Swami, says there are many ways, we can learn from different Swamis. Anyhow, I don't like to take too much time from you this evening. I'm really grateful and that Swami came and stayed with us few days and inspired us with his spiritual life and spiritual experiences. And we hope the Swami will come again in near future. Good night, everybody.